I don't know if you know the LeBron James story well, that you can take us through the five T's, the timing, when the development happened with LeBron, the tenure,
Yeah.
how much tribulation it caused. So I think that's a very, very good
Yes.
step-by-step process. And I think people can sort of relate to this because they know him well.
Yes.
Um, Take us through those processes of
Yes.
LeBron's life.
Yep. Okay, good. So I have this framework in the book which I call the adverse T's, the letter T. It's because there are five different dimensions of adversity that are critical to potentially shaping the traumatic signature. So type we've kind of talked about a little bit, and that's in some ways articulated through the Adverse Childhood Experience Survey. Although I want to put a flag here that that original survey only looked at adversity that happens kind of within the family. And what the community of experts and scholars in this area have realized, of course, is that there are a lot of different kinds of adversity that happen outside the family: discrimination and oppression, poverty, community violence, war, right? There's a whole disease. There's lots of things that are adverse for the child and their parents that are happening outside of the family. Okay, so the typology is much greater than those 10 that I originally gave you. That's part one. The second is timing. When in development does it occur? Okay, the reason why that one is in particular important, and let me give you two kind of results, is that we know the earlier in development adversity happens, the worse it is for outcomes. Okay, so that's point one. The second point related to that is that child development is characterized by different windows of opportunity, what are often called either critical or sensitive periods. And if certain kinds of experiences don't happen within those windows, or adverse ones happen, it can greatly derail, if not eliminate, the development of whatever those skills or things that are developing happen, whether it's language, emotion, sensory systems, perceptual systems, motor systems, autonomic systems. So when things occur is critical. Everybody who has been a parent knows that early in life, the child isn't born speaking fully in sentences. They go through a babbling phase, and then a one-word phase, and then a two-word phase, and then begins the building of syntax and grammar and all these other things. That system is part of our biology, but it requires certain kinds of linguistic experience during certain periods of development, or you get massive delays or sometimes no language development at all if it's that severe. Okay, so that's timing, second T. Third T, tenure. How long does it last? Okay, when the originators said the adverse childhood experiences, they never define what's an experience. There are children all over the world living in abject poverty their entire childhood. So the tenure covers every piece of their developmental windows. There are others, maybe because of something like COVID, where a father and mother lose their jobs, and maybe they have no means of making ends meet. And they've got a period of a year or two where they're very, very, very poor. And then it ends, right? So tenure is important because it covers up these different windows, and it's how long that child is living with chronic stress often. So, I tell a story in the book where a child was exposed to a very, very abusive father. LeBron James, you asked about his story. He starts out life, right, living pretty much in poverty with no home, right? With no father. He's racking up lots of aces. But then in his middle school years, things change. He gets a stable home life. He gets a stable father figure who's completely invested in him. His mother is always there. Their resources change. He's developing socially. He's being not neglected anymore. So that kind of terminates for him. Other children, LeBron James' experience, carried throughout their teen years, and that was their life. It defined it. Many of the children I live with, that's their life. That's their tenure. That's the third T. The fourth T is what I call turbulence. And turbulence is kind of the predictability or controllability of the adversity. A child living in consistent poverty has no control over that, of course. Children often don't have control over their environment to a large extent, but it's predictable. Every day, I don't know where I'm going to stay. I'm not sure how much food I'm going to get. It's very predictable. A child who has an abusive father who is abusive when he's drunk is completely unpredictable and completely uncontrollable. And we know for everyone, not just children, you, me, everybody listening, when we don't have control over what's going on, it's incredibly stressful. COVID was monumentally stressful for everybody because of the uncertainty. Am I going to get it? Why aren't you wearing a mask? Why are you wearing a mask? Whatever it was, we have something to be stressed about, right? You know, what's going to toilet paper running out. What? I mean, it was like there were all these insane things that we had no control over. So that's stressful for everybody, particularly stressful for a child because the environment is completely out of whack. That's turbulence. The last one is toxicity, the severity of the adversity. Okay. And here, again, I'm pointing to just how severe it is. And this, like some of these other dimensions, there's a kind of a relative nature to it. And this would be a good thing for the fact that I'm sure you have an international audience. When you think about something like physical abuse, having lived in Kenya and Uganda and other East African countries, there's a history up until fairly recently that in schools, you could cane a child if they were misbehaving. Take a stick and whack him. I lived in France when I was a 9-year-old, and at school, if we misbehaved, the teacher took out the metal ruler and whacked our knuckles. Okay, so hitting someone in a school environment is not something that is gone. There are 19 states within the United States where that's completely legal still. So when you ask the question, were you physically abused? Just like were you neglected? We have to also put a cultural lens around that, because a child who grows up in a school where if I misbehave, my father slaps my butt. If I misbehave in school, I get whacked by a stick. For them, that wouldn't even count probably as physical abuse because it's just part of the cultural norm. So whenever we're thinking about these experiences, we need to think about the lens of the culture and how that culture may have shaped the thinking of that child. That's also important because even a culture that says this is our norm in school of hitting kids when they misbehave, the traumatic response may nonetheless be there, but that child would indicate physical abuse. So those are kind of the 5 dimensions.